We've all heard the statement, "Who you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say." That's absolutely true. And in our first session, when we talked about a mindset of communication, we talked about the first element of three in the communication process. And you'll recall that would be the speaker. We talked about what kind of speaker conveys that message to penetrate a heart, a person of character, compassion, and content that answers the three questions everybody is asking. Can I trust you? Do you care for me? And do you know your stuff? And so as we move from that, we're now talking about the second part of the communication process, and that is the message itself. But keep this in mind, there are two parts to the message itself. One is how you say the message, and the other is what you say in the message. And thus the two terms, art, how you say it, and what, the science of what you're going to convey to your audience. So let's get started. Let's talk first of all about the art of communication. What do we mean by that? Simply the attitude you project, the mood you create, the spirit behind your words that trump the verbal. There are 26 signal systems we always give off to people. We're unaware of most of those. But one of them that is very strong is the nonverbal aspect of communication. It always trumps the verbal. Again, that means that the art of communication always trumps the science. Said briefly, and we did this in our first session, how you look and how you sound has more importance than the words you say. Now, if you take that phrase, how you look, that is significant, coming across lovingly, how you sound with a tone of voice and body language that's very strong, then the message becomes everything. And we talked about that in the communications rocket. But what we're really dealing with here, and you could say it a number of different ways, is all of us want a person that has humility, has empathy, and has gone through the tough times in life of adversity. You remember what we said earlier, that character, compassion, and content? That's what those terms mean. If you come across as a person of humility, it means, and they sense it right away, that you're a person of character. You're not contrived, you don't force the message, you are yourself, you're authentic, you're believable, you're true to yourself. That's what people are looking for. As we said, people go wild over real people. But then secondly, there is the area of empathy. People want to know whether you care, and that's the whole idea of compassion. A fellow feeler is really the word. You throw a lariat out to your people and you pull them in. As one person said, it's like making a candle. You melt them, then you mold them, and then you make them hard. And that hardness comes in the message that is set up. You're like a divine surgeon. You soften the skin through ethos and pathos, and then you slide the knife in of logos, and guess what? They end up loving it. But there's a third element, and that's adversity. I will tell you that I will saddle up next to somebody if I've known they are taxi-tested tough. If they've gone through the problems of life and they've come out on the other end to be people of integrity. The word integrity simply means to be morally predictable. Again, the whole idea of trust that surrounds all of this is extremely important. You know what the good news is? Here's the good news. Did you know that character, compassion, and content, you and I can control? We can grow in those three areas. Most of life is out of our control. What we can control is who we are, whether we love, and whether we have worked hard on the message itself. There is no substitute for those three. So that's the art. What mood do you project? My friend and I were talking a bit earlier about the fact that when you go home and you open the door, nobody's saying a word, but everybody's saying something. And the tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. You sense that something is wrong, but nobody has said a word. You go into a business meeting, you sit down, and all of a sudden there's a sense of something is wrong here. But nobody has said anything yet. It's a nonverbal communication that connects us. So that's where we're going to start. Ethos, pathos, and logos, simply put, that's the nonverbal. Do you come across, without saying a word, as a person of character, compassion, and content? Now, the heart of developing a message is to how to get that 7% into orbit to create 100%, and that's critical as well. And that's where the science of communication comes in. The content, the logos, and that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this session. How you say it, extremely important. Now we're going to go into what you say, and that's the science. Everybody with me? All right, here we go. There's 3 parts to the science of communication, extraordinarily important. First, there is how you organize a message. I sincerely believe that most people set up housekeeping in a revolving door when it comes to delivering a message. They have too many points. They recite them too quickly. They move too fast. And it is like an overload of information. It's like washing over me, taking a sip out of a roaring fire hydrant. You can't absorb it. Your brain clutters. So what's the key to that? How to organize a message so that it is a rifle shot and it is on target. There's a book I love called Words on Target. That's absolutely true. We want to hit the audience where they live. And if you give them too much, too quickly, they don't absorb any of it. And so how do you organize is the key to what? To clarity. What we want when we communicate is to absolutely be clear. The best compliment I get is that my messages are clear, but there's a second, and that is language. What do I mean by language? Simply put, I'm talking about narratives or stories, how people relate to you, your style, how your personality comes across. Most of the people that I listen to do not have good enough stories. It's like having too many pitchers in a baseball game in the bullpen. You can't have too many good pitchers. You can't have too many really, really good illustrations. And we're going to talk about where those come from in our next session. Organization, clarity. Language, here we go, color. Did you know that you're an artist when you communicate? You paint pictures on the canvas of a person's mind. You know how that's done? Through great stories. We all need great stories. From Jesus of Nazareth, who was a terrific storyteller, to Martin Luther King, to Winston Churchill, you can go down the list. Those men and their many women, Margaret Thatcher, etc., who told phenomenal stories. And so we all want to be a good storyteller. Organization, clarity. Language, bringing color to it. Not just fact after fact after fact, but interspersing it with color as an artist. It's called the art of communication there, but it's also called the science, and that's where they marry. Third, delivery. I don't talk too much about delivery. And the reason I don't is because if I talk too much about delivery, you would become preoccupied with where you stand and how you move and the gestures you make. Frankly, those are really incidental. What I want to see is your personality come out of that. I don't want you to do certain kinds of gestures to make an impact. Just be yourself. But here's the thing. If you believe in your message, and this is critical, your delivery will take care of itself. Your delivery is simply your voice and your body. You believe in that message, it will come across as strong, it will come across as simple, and it will come across as sweet to the ear and to the heart. Here's what I'm saying. All delivery is conviction. That's all it is. So you have clarity, you have color, you have conviction. I hope those 3 become very old to you after a while. OLD, organization, language, and delivery. Let me close this session out by an illustration. In the first session, we had the rocket ship. Now I'm going to talk about the brain. Right, the brain. Did you know that there are first brain communicators and there are second brain communicators? All of us want to strive to be first brain communicators. We want to combine the two, but it's which one comes first, and it's first brain. You know why it comes first? Because we were born with a developing brain that is called first brain. from a communication standpoint, or the scientists would call it, medical people would call it, the limbic system. This is where emotions are formed when you're a small tyke. And this is where fight and flight comes in. This is where you begin to have a kaleidoscope of emotions throughout your life. It develops early in life. You feel certain emotions. And then the second brain develops, or the cerebral cortex, which is give me the facts, just give me the facts. There are people like that. They're analytical. They want the facts. But I suggest to you, even the analytical people want to know whether they can relate to you or not. So you combine the two. But what comes first? It's the limbic system, or emotions take place, where people like you, whether they're drawn to you, whether they say things like, you're my kind of person, where they relate to you. And really what we're talking about here is almost a cadence when you communicate. It's talking to people, not at people. It's taking your time to have a conversation. Now, it's enhanced because if it's one to many, you've got to amplify that. But it's still a conversation. You're not talking down to people, you're talking adult to adult communication. So here's what I mean. The outer, if you consider yourself, look at this in a concentric circle diagram, would be very helpful. The outer part would be the emotions. This is where really from humor to using names are extremely important and extremely emotional. It's where you use humor to draw people in. Many, many ways that you can create emotion within your listeners. Bill Clinton, ex-president of the United States, was a genius at creating a connection with the audience. His great statement was when he ran for presidency, "I feel your pain." Well, people felt that he did. And in many ways, that's why he won the election, because they felt like he really cared. They felt good about connecting with him. But here's the thing. People will relate first to your emotions if they like you, if they're drawn to you. There's a little gatekeeper, so to speak, by way of analogy, that opens up to the second part of the brain, and that's where knowledge is, that's where facts are stated, that's where your cerebral cortex is, and suddenly there's a marriage between the two. Words learned earliest in life have the strongest force and power. Did you know that? Because they carry the greatest emotion. Words learned earliest in life. So always put your words on the lower shelf. The lambs can come to feed, and the giraffes, those big content people, they can bend their necks if they're motivated enough. But we are speaking to average people. Our communication should be childlike. We're going to talk about that more later on. Not childish, but childlike, so that we understand. Remember, the goal of communication is to be mutually understood. So, what's the bottom line here? People buy on emotion and they justify with fact. Whether you're a coach, whether you're a salesperson, whether you're a parent, or whether you're a sibling. People buy on emotion and justify with fact. What does that mean? It means people are drawn to you as a listener by emotion. In sales, for example, people are drawn to you in a sales process by emotion. So you attract people that way, but to keep people, in a sales metaphor, your clients, you justify that relationship by continually feeding them the facts. It's a beautiful combination of both and, not either or. So that's where we're headed, right here. We've talked about the speaker himself. We're talking about the big view, the overview of the message itself. Now we're going to dive in our next session to talk about organization, then language, and then content. How do you make it come alive? How do you talk so people will listen?